And just a quick housekeeping, I believe everybody's on mute right now, but just please make sure that you are on mute. And when you have questions, we will take them throughout the course of the presentation. And hopefully we answer all the questions that you have. And to get started, I am Mel. I am your marketing and communications director, a co-race director. So if you see any newsletters, social media posts, that's me. So welcome. And then our presenting coach today is Pete from Tri CLE Coaching. And we also have Natalie on the call. There she is. And she is your main race director, event lead. She wears a ton of hats too. So she makes sure we get all of our permits to put this race on. So Pete, I'll let you do your introduction that you want to do, but I just want to do a quick one.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. So thank you. So hello, everyone. I am Coach Pete. I am a co-owner of Tri CLE Coaching, and I'm really happy to get to spend a little bit of time with you this evening talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is multisport. I work a lot with Nat and Mel. This is, I think, one of the premier races that we have access to, not just because it's in Greater Cleveland. I actually think it's a very well-run race. I think it's a fun race course, and I really am excited to be a part of it every year it comes along. So I think sometimes we take this stuff for granted, and I just wanted to take a moment and say I've raced in a lot of places and in a lot of different races. This is a very professionally run and well-organized race, and I'm really excited to get to talk to you guys today about both that and multisport in general. So with that, I'm going to take a second and actually introduce myself. I already said I was Coach Pete, but what you might not know is that in addition to being a coach, I've been doing athletics myself. So I am a 9-time Ironman finisher. So when I talk to you, I speak both from a level of expertise with coaching, but I also speak from a level of expertise that I've done these things. I've run really long, far distance races. I've started at the bottom of mountains and run to the top of mountains. I've done multi-day events like Triple T and Dopey's Challenge, which I have a photo of myself there with the Dopey Challenge medals there. But the other thing I want to call it is that I am actually a USA Triathlon Level 2 certified coach. I'm an Ironman U certified coach. I'm a Training Peaks certified coach, US Masters Swim Level 2 certified coach, etc. So this really is something that I have a lot of experience and expertise in. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. That's why I'm here tonight. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk a little bit about multisport, and we're going to talk about what equipment's needed and some general nutrition guidelines and training guidelines. But then we're going to get into some topics about winter training. February is winter sport month or winter training month. We're just still at the edge of inside February, so thought we'd talk a little bit about that and how I think about winter training as we get into it. So the first thing we want to talk about is Tri CLE specific. And that is that they have a lot of different race opportunities. So Tri CLE kind of maximizes what options you might have. If you say, hey, Pete, my knees hurt, I don't want to run. Well, they've got aqua bike options. If you say, hey, Pete, I'm not really good at X, Y, or Z, we got duathlon, we got triathlon. There's all sorts of options here. So whether you want to go with a super sprint, a sprint, or an Olympic distance race, they have that. Generally speaking, duathlons are going to be run and bike. Triathlons are going to be swim, bike, and run, and then aqua bike is going to be swim and bike, not run. I don't know why it says run there, but aqua bike is exactly what it sounds like. It cuts out the run. And so if you're thinking about any of these distances, or if you have any questions about what it takes to do some of these distances, please let me know. But in general, there's an option, or there should be an option for just about anybody at this event. One of the primary questions we get asked is, hey, I'm a runner, I want to be a triathlete. Hey, I'm a swimmer, I want to be a triathlete. Hey, I'm a cyclist, I want to be a triathlete. What do I need to get into the sport? And I think there's this misconception with the sport where there's this barrier to entry where people think that you need to make extensive investments and significant investments. And that's not necessarily true. If you have some swim goggles and a swimsuit, if you have a bike and a bike helmet, and if you have some running shoes and running clothes, you're ready to do a triathlon. There's nothing there's nothing specifically exclusive. You don't need the most expensive bike. And I've worked a lot of transitions at different races. You see all variety and manner of people and equipment at these races. And so the first thing I want to say is you don't need much. So let's get started with what you have, and then we can move forward. Next question I always get is, what would I buy next? And my answer is things that make me comfortable. And the reason I say that is because a comfortable triathlete or a comfortable athlete at any level is going to be an athlete that probably works out more. It's going to be an athlete that enjoys racing more, and is an athlete who probably comes back and continues to do the work to both train and race successfully. So that's really different for every individual. I've had people who start out with that basic level of equipment, swim, bike, and run. And the first thing they said is, my seat is uncomfortable, or I have problems while I'm riding the bike. And so we can have conversations about, should we add different kinds of cycling shorts, or should we talk about changing the cycling seat, or should we talk about a new bike fit? There's lots of different ways you can approach that, but maybe that's the next investment. I've had other people that say, hey, you know, when I run my feet, I get blisters. Now let's look at some new socks and see if the socks change it. Let's look at some new shoes. Let's look at the running surfaces. So the idea of like what comes next, whether what that investment should look like, really matters to the individual athlete. But we also want to make sure that we're doing things like water bottles, because if you stay well hydrated, you're going to be more comfortable. Sunscreen, because if you're sitting in the sun as much training as you might be doing, want to make sure that you're keeping your skin safe and healthy. UV is no joke. Skin cancer is no joke. Sunburns are no joke. So make sure you're really protecting yourself out there. Then there's all sorts of kinds of lubrication that you can put on to keep chafing and other kind of body challenges away, whether it's sweat in your socks and you're putting cornstarch or other kinds of products in there, or whether it's Body Glide and other kinds of Tri-Slide products to help you fit into things better. You notice that we've gone for the first several minutes into this, and I haven't even mentioned things like wetsuits or, you know, things like that, because those are actually things that you add later. And depending on what investments you think would make sense, that's when you start talking about things like wetsuits and other kinds of investments. So after we decide that we have enough equipment to do a triathlon, or to start training for a triathlon, and after we've decided that we've become a little comfortable, the next biggest challenge that we usually end up talking about is nutrition. And so the key about nutrition is it's all the time. I have athletes that come to me and they talk to me and they're like, well, what should I be eating while I'm working out? And the question is what were you eating before you worked out? What were you eating after you worked out? What were you eating yesterday? What were you eating tomorrow? It matters, because if you haven't eaten a balanced diet through the day, through the week, and let's say you woke up in the morning and you had a piece of toast, and then you went to work and you worked an 8-hour shift, you got off work and you decided, hey, Coach Pete, I'm going to go for my run now, and you go out and try and do a tempo run, and you're like, I don't know why I bonked. I was eating my sports gel while I was running. I'm like, well, you know, when did you eat dinner yesterday? Oh, I mean, I ate a late dinner. It's probably like 8:30. I'm like, so between 8:30 and 6 the next day, you had one piece of toast the entire day. And you think the reason you bonked on the run was because you ate a sports gel? So we really need to take this into account and talk about how we're eating a balanced nutritional diet through the whole day, starting in the morning, working throughout the day. Sometimes that's eating and snacking, and eating and snacking, and staying well hydrated. So we talk about the idea that you find normal eating. There's a lot of places that you can find references for normal eating. I mentioned that I'm the co-owner of Tri CLE. My business partner, Coach Kendra, also a USAT certified coach, etc. She's a registered dietitian and a practicing nutritionist. And so one of the things that we do is we spend a lot of time talking and working with our athletes on what a balanced plate looks like, what a balanced plate looks like in different times of the training season. Because if you're in a base period during the winter, if you're in a build period or a specific race prep, you might need to eat more of certain nutrients, whether that's carbs to help fuel, or whether that's protein to help build muscles, or some of these other supplemental nutrients and micronutrients that we're trying to get to make sure your muscles are recovered and healthy to go. But at the end of the day, eat normally. Don't overeat. I see people all the time that will go for a 300 calorie run, and then they'll eat a 10,000 calorie dinner saying they went for a 300 calorie run. And they ask me, hey, I feel a little bloated going to the next day. I'm like, you ate more than you really needed to at that point. You weren't really trying to make up a calorie deficit. So it's real important to think about that holistically. Finally, how do you put it all together? And again, as a certified coach, I'm going to tell you the best option is to talk to a coach. I am a coaching option. There are a lot of coaches out there. There are a lot of training plans. If you can see down here to the left of my desk, boy, I'm probably looking at 20 different books of different training plans, different ideas, different coaching methodologies. Behind me, a bunch of other books that talk about different things. There's no one right way to do it. The idea is to pick up the best, to figure out what your goals are and to put those together. But at a high level, if you're training for something that's an Olympic distance or shorter race, you can probably do that within a 12-week training block. And then you want to break that training block into some specific things. So if you think about it, I just mentioned some things like base training, general prep training, and specific prep. And so the idea is that we're trying in some of those phases, we're trying to lay some foundation to get the body ready to do work. Then we're trying to make the body faster. So we're trying to increase your power outputs or your running pace outputs. And then finally, we're trying to build up that speed and that endurance into something that's race specific in a specific prep. So if you look at that, and you break that down, really, if you look at the sample schedule I have here, we're just trying to balance where you don't run every day, you don't swim every day. So if you look, you got run, then you don't have run, you don't even get back to a run until later in the week. You've got swim, then you don't have swim. Have a couple of sessions each in a couple of days to add some strength. And we just gradually increase that. So we start out at where you're at today, and we look at how we move that forward in increments, never improving more than 10% per week, or increasing more than 10% per week. That's a super important number. Some athletes shouldn't even go to 10%. But if there's one thing I see slows my athletes down, or slows athletes down who've come to me to start, it's that they've gotten injured, or they've repeatedly gotten injured. And so they're looking for advice and help coaching so that they don't get back into that injury cycle. If you get injured, you're not working out. If you're not working out, you're not getting faster, you're not building strength. So the most important thing is to stay uninjured and remain healthy. And that means sometimes if you're running 10 miles per week right now, what's 10% of 10 miles? It means you're running 11 miles next week, not 20 miles next week. And that's a real important thing to keep in mind. Finally, you'll notice that I talk here about journaling. As a coach, the most important thing is to have contact with the athlete and get that information back, to know what was done. I might have said go run for 20 minutes and maybe an athlete ran for 60 minutes. That's important to know. Might have said go run for 60 minutes and an athlete ran for 20 minutes. That's important to know. So understanding what work you put in, what intensities you put in, and knowing how you want to structure those to build, it's important. If you take anything away from what I'm saying on this slide, the key is that you need to have a plan. And you can't just make it up or do what your friend's doing or show up because you saw somebody post on Facebook. And so I went and did that thing, or I saw it on TikTok and I did that thing. That's not going to yield the outcomes you're looking for. So you want to really think about, where am I at today? Where's my race goal? How do I put together a structure or a plan that makes sense to get me from where I'm at to where I want to be? Just heard something when you can show there's no questions. Okay. All right.
We're good.
So the next couple of slides, I want to really spend some time talking about what it means to race. So Tri CLE is a USA Triathlon sanctioned race. Many of the races that you're going to participate in are USA Triathlon sanctioned, or at least governed by USA Triathlon rules. That means that they will either have their own officiating teams, or they'll have USA Triathlon referees on site helping officiate the event. Officiating is super important because officiating means that everybody has a common group of rules and a common set of safety. So I want to talk about the rules that we see most frequently become a challenge for athletes as they try and step into triathlon. So by far the biggest thing we see is helmet and chin strap challenges. If you are touching your bike, and that means if you're standing beside your bike and you have your hands on your bike in transition, you need to have a helmet on, you need to have your chin strap fastened. I've seen people in transition where they've got their bike and they're moving through transition and they have their helmet on, but their chin strap isn't strapped. If an official sees that, that can be a penalty. And penalties mean time differences or reduction in your race output. So at the end of the day, every time I touch my bike, whether I'm training or racing, I make sure I have my helmet on and my chin strap strapped. That way it's muscle memory and I don't have a challenge when it gets to race day and I'm trying to do something different. Next one up is unauthorized assistance. That means that the people that are race volunteers or race officials, they can help you, but people that aren't a part of that, they cannot. I got to tell you, as a coach, last year I was at Ironman Ohio, and one of my athletes came out of transition from the swim to the bike, and he had his bike, and he started riding away. I thought he was gone. And like 20 seconds later, he shows up beside me with his bike, and he's like, I flatted, what do I do? I'm like, I can't help you. You need to walk back over to that race official and see if they can give you some assistance. That person actually went and found a pump and helped him restore what he needed to do. But it's that critical. I'm his coach. I'm an Ironman and USA Triathlon certified coach. And I was actually there in an official capacity with Ironman, but not as a race volunteer. I could not help my athlete repair their flat tire. That's a very important, because I see people all the time on race courses getting handed something from their spouse or partner, where they're handed like some water or some chapstick or something like that. If that's seen, it's a race violation. It can be bad. I've actually seen people disqualified from races for that, depending on how egregious it was. Drafting, that's another important thing, and we can talk a little bit more about that. And when you get to the race, they will be talking about it a lot. What that means is we need to be spaced out. So when you get to a bike in front of you, you have to have a lot of space between you and that next bike. It's about 7 bike lengths. And when you enter that drafting zone, you need to execute a pass. And if you have been passed, you need to drop back out of the back of that draft zone before you try and overtake again. I see that a lot because people get in that zone and they hang out. And that'll get you a penalty. But the most important thing I see where people get penalized is where they'll pass, or they'll be passed, and they don't drop all the way back out of that draft zone before they try and overtake. You have to drop all the way back out before you come through. You gotta know your course. You're responsible for knowing the course, and you got to stay on the course. So if you're off the course for any reason, that can be challenging. Look at the race maps, understand the race, and then stay on the course. Headphones on the run, especially, we see that you cannot have headphones. That is an absolute violation of all the rules in triathlon. People who are moving from running marathons and 5 and 10Ks, and they come to triathlon, that's usually a significant change for them. But it's important. It's a safety issue, and it also just makes it a little funner. So I've participated in some marathons recently, and a lot of people have headphones on. It makes it kind of hard to talk to people. And in triathlon, there are no headphones, so that means everybody out there on the run course is suffering the same as you and having fun, and you get to talk to them. So just remember that: no headphones, no communication devices. It means if they see you with your cell phone pulled out, even if you think you're using it to track your run, that can be a violation or a disqualification. No communication devices, no headphones. Glass containers, that's a little less as far as my observation, but basically people that are coming out of the swim in bare feet, we don't want them to trample over a broken glass container. So no glass on in transition or in the race area. You got to have your race numbers. So specifically in triathlon and in Tri CLE, that means on the run. So you can write those on your arm if you want with a marker, but your bike, you're going to get stickers for it. But when you get to the run, you got to have that race bib on your person and run with that in the front so that people can see you when you're running towards them, they can see your race number. And you can't transfer anything. So if you're sick the last 2 days before the race and you decide you can't race and you give your race number to your friend, that can get both you and your friend in trouble. So it's very important that if you think you're going to try and transfer, that you reach out to people like Natalie and Mel, and you say, hey, I'd like to transfer my race number, and they'll talk to you about what options may or may not be available, but you cannot do it on a download. That will get you both not just maybe disqualified from this race, but possibly suspended from being allowed to race in future events for a period of time. So super important. So I'm going to pause because I just threw a ton of stuff at people about like, hey, here's some random equipment you might want to get if you're thinking about getting into triathlon. Here's some random nutrition advice. Here's some random ideas on how you'd structure training. And here's a bunch of rules that we see people violate and get them in trouble. And I haven't even moved on to like what it might be for winter training or things. So while we're at this point, I just want to pause and see if there's some questions. Everybody here is just ready to go out and do Tri CLE tomorrow, right? Thumbs up. I'm looking away from my camera because on this screen, you guys are all over here. So
Mark, you have a question or you want to, oh, Mark, he put his thumb up. He wants to race.
Mark was born ready to race. So, all right, guys. So let's talk a little bit about winter training. So one of the things that we want to keep in focus, and you're going to hear me come back to this every time you talk to me. It's always fun because I find training plans to be a challenge. Training plans are a great starting point. So if you've either purchased an online training plan or you're following one of the training plans you can get from like all the websites out, there's a million websites with training plans, or maybe you purchased a book that has a training plan. Training plans are a really good foundation. But I have athletes all the time and they ask me very specific questions. Should I be doing more training at threshold? Should I be doing this? Should I be eating this? And my answer is always, it depends. And I'm not saying that to be squirrely. It really, really, really depends. And so the root of the starting point is always going to be, what is your goal? And I always approach every training session. I always approach every training block. I always approach every annual training plan about what is your goal. So if you're an athlete and you say, hey, I want to throw a 10K on my race plan and I want to do it like next Sunday, what do you think? Well, why do you want to do that? Maybe it's just to have fun. That's great. So let's have fun. But you want to know why you're doing it. It's funny because if you don't ask that question, sometimes I'll have an athlete come to me and say, I want to throw a 10K on, and I'll be, all right. And we start, you know, it's like next week. And then as we get closer, they're like, and I want a PR. I'm like, whoa, wait, I thought we were throwing that on for fun. I didn't know we were trying to PR that race. Let's talk about this. So it's super important to ask, what's the goal? All right, so now let's talk about winter training. When you're in winter training, why are you training? Is it to maintain a friendship group? Maybe you have a training club that you want to stay with. That's good to know. Are you trying to get a fitness outcome? So I have several athletes right now that are racing Ironman Texas. Ironman Texas is in April. If you don't notice, April's about 8 weeks out, 7 weeks out, something like that right now. So if you look at what their training plan looks like, my goodness, some of those guys have like 6 and 8 hour bike rides like this weekend. You want to ride your bike for 6 or 8 hours inside? You need to know what your goal is. Once you know what your goal is, you can start structuring it. And so if your goal is to do certain things to prepare yourself for a race season in the spring or summer, that might mean that we're preparing with strength activities like core activation, building general fitness, making sure like that the way the tendons connect to the bones, like that we're strengthening those kinds of interconnections so that we're ready to take the training loads on later as we increase. What kinds of equipment do you need to do this? Gym memberships, cycling, indoor cycling trainers, treadmills. If you're going to run or ride outside, you need layers and lots of warm clothing. I love getting outside. But again, you have to ask yourself, what is your goal? I had an athlete who had knee surgery and is one of my ultra runners who does like 100-mile races. And he had been not running at all. And we've been doing PT and doing some other things. And I got a text from him that on the coldest day of this winter a few weeks ago, he went out and did a 4-mile training run because he wanted to see how the knee would feel with his new knee brace. And I asked him how it went, and he said it went horrible. He got frostbite on his legs, his knee hurt, and everything else. And I was like, so was that the appropriate day? Was that the appropriate time to decide to go outside and run? And if you knew that athlete, you'd say, well, you know, to run 100 miles, you have to be a little willing to push the envelope. So I guess that's his personality. But it's important because if it's really bad weather outside, and I talked to you about like risking injury is probably the number one thing that you need to avoid. Do you want to go outside and risk slipping? Do you want to go outside and maybe pull a hamstring or a groin because you're fighting through maybe too much snow or you can't get enough footing to do that? So there's a time when you need to say, all right, if my goal is to be prepared for a race or to be fit to do something, today the treadmill might be the way I drive that outcome. Today, doing repeated strength training might be the way I drive that outcome. Today, riding my bike inside might be the way I drive that outcome. So again, what kinds of things do we decide to do in winter training and how much has a lot to do with that. So what do I think about in winter training when I'm working personally and with my athletes? Winter training is a great time to focus on things like skills. So when we're outside and we're riding our bike on the towpath, or even worse, we're riding our bike on the like on an open road with cars, is that a good time to clip one leg out and try and ride your bike with just your left foot, or clip the other foot out and try and ride your bike with just the right foot? That's a horrible time to try and do it. And so it doesn't mean that in the summer we don't do those activities, but we do them where we say, hey, ride with 80% on one leg and 20% on the other thing, do it more mentally. But when you're on your indoor trainer, you can clip out and just ride and do an isolated leg drill real easy. You can do spin up drills, and you can really focus on what the outcome of that training is. Another thing I see people doing a lot in the winter is they'll set their water bottles will just be set on like a tray table beside their bike. Put your water bottles in the water bottle holder. It's a really great time if you ride. So when I ride all winter, my water bottles are in that water bottle holder. And when I move to outside, so I have rear water bottle holders. When I move to outside training, I don't have to remember where my water bottle is, because all winter long I've been reaching back to grab that to drink. So I know by muscle memory exactly where that is. What that means is now I can focus on the road. I can focus on bringing my cycling handling skills back up, the balance, the potholes, all that. And I'm not having to relearn where the water bottle is or what the skills are to deal with my water bottle. And I see people not practicing these inside. Keep your food in your jersey pocket. If you're going to be riding your bike outside and reaching back to grab nutrition, put your nutrition in your jersey pocket. Put your nutrition in the bike frame if that's where you're going to have your nutrition. But you can practice that all winter long. Another thing I do a lot is I practice changing flat tires. In the summer, usually that's where my bigger workout time is. So I'm doing longer training sessions in the summer. And so what that means is it's really hard for me. I'm married. I have a couple of jobs. I have athletes. I don't really have time to figure out how to change a flat tire in the summer, because I was busy riding my bike for 6 hours and talking to my athletes and trying to make sure the rest of my life is in balance. But you know what? In the winter, I have lots of time. Maybe I'm even sitting there in front of the TV, watching TV with my wife. What do I have? I have a spare wheel, and I'm taking it off, and I'm practicing changing the tube. Winter is a great time to get that kind of stuff. And then mindfulness. So I just talked to you about how challenging it can be for athletes to get on a treadmill and run, or how challenging it might be for an athlete to get on an indoor trainer and ride their bike for a long time. I mentioned at the start of this, I'm a 9-time Ironman finisher. That's a 140.6-mile race. Do you think that over 112 miles that my mind never drifted, not once, over 9 Ironmans? My mind definitely drifted. What do you think happened to my training metrics or my race metrics when my mind was drifting? Do you think I was maintaining the power output I needed to maintain, or the heart rate zones I needed to maintain? Do you think maybe I forgot to take my nutrition every 15 minutes? Maybe I forgot to drink. Maybe I forgot to eat. And what do you think that meant if I did that at mile 56 on the bike? What do you think that meant at mile 13 on the marathon in that Ironman, right? Winter training is a great opportunity for us to sit there and say, how do I stay in touch with my body? How do I understand what my body feels like when I'm doing these things? Because I don't have a lot of other distractions. And one of the things I think is super important is my athletes are usually really dialed in on their metrics. And the metrics are not the primary factor. We should be dialed in holistically on our body, and we should know how our body feels. And so instead of saying my goal was to ride my bike at 100 watts on the bike or at 100 beats per minute, my goal was to know what my body feels like and know what that power output feels like. So if I didn't have the metrics, I know how my body feels and I'm in touch with my body. So it's a really good time for us to practice that. When I'm on the treadmill, I do all sorts of goofy things. And because I get all excited, like maybe I'm watching some TV off on the side, or like my favorite song comes on and I'm on the treadmill and I start dancing around and jumping. And I look down, I'm like, holy crap, my heart rate just moved way out of zone 2 all the way up into zone 4. That's really useful information for me to log, because what do you think happens on that Ironman run when there's somebody there and I'm celebrating with them and I do my little jog left and right? Well, now I'm making a decision. Do I want to spend that energy, or do I need that energy for later? That kind of thing. So mindfulness and understanding and linking what the training that you're doing when you're inside to how your body responds to it and what it means to your metrics, super important thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about
one thing there.
Pardon, Nat?
If I jump in and touch on one thing there.
Please do.
I mean, Pete's the coach here, but someone as myself who has also raced for many years and at longer distances. And you started to touch on it, but I think it's kind of important to touch is that so much of this sport, and those of you that are new to it may not have realized this yet, is the mental aspect of the sport. And so if you can use your winter training or the long runs to really push yourself mentally, you will be more successful on race day. Race day, it's you've done the training, right? It's the physical, cash is in the drawer, and now it's just how is your mind going to react to you pushing yourself on race day. So keep that in mind when you're doing your training.
Yep. So I absolutely agree. I think mental is probably the primary discipline that you need to worry about. I've seen athletes that were physically very well prepared and they didn't have the race outcomes that were expected. Some of them might not have even finished a race. And I think it was mental. And then I've seen other athletes that I would have recommended maybe shouldn't even start the race because I thought they weren't prepared at all. And I thought they were actually at risk. And I've seen them be successful in ways that I wasn't sure from a purely physical biometrics perspective that they should have been doing that. And they were successful. And what's the difference? It's that mental. So that does not mean that you should not train. So please do not misunderstand. Coach Pete did not say skip all the workouts and just think hard. But you have to understand that that mental aspect is probably one of the primary aspects because this is uncomfortable. It doesn't matter. I always find it amusing. My wife she was running and she was in a running program. She's like, when does it stop hurting? And I made the mistake of saying, if you're doing it right, never. And I think she stopped running at that point and never came back to running. But, and that's not true. It shouldn't hurt, but it is, especially racing. Racing is really, depending on what your outcome is or what your goals are, racing can be participatory or celebratory, like fun, having, friends wanting to get your first accomplishment for finishing something. But it can also be, hey, I'm trying to PR or I'm trying to find out where my own performance limits are. And so if you're doing those things, usually that's going to result in something that's not always comfortable at every second of the race, and how you respond to that and what you do about that. But the other thing I'll say is the race fights you. So I have never had a race go the way I expected. So as soon as that start, one of the things I talk with my athletes about is as soon as the race starts, as soon as they put you in the water, they shoot that start cannon, they blow the whistle, they tell you to go, whatever the siren is that starts the race. Everything in the world is going to be trying to stop you and make you leave before you finish. And the question is how are you going to respond to that? What are you going to do to overcome that obstacle and keep moving forward until you get to that finish line? And when you get to that finish line, that's why you feel that pride and that success, because it doesn't matter whether it's a duathlon, an aqua bike, a triathlon. It doesn't matter whether it's a sprint or an ultra or a long course. Every single one of those races is going to have that same kind of experience. You start, you have ideas, something changes. How do you respond? When you're successful, you finish and you feel accomplishment. I'm going to talk a little bit about reverse periodization. So periodization is the structure I was talking about in coaching, where we just break big things and big ideas up into smaller things so we know what we're doing. The simplest is if you have a race plan and you're at point A and you're trying to get to your first race or your main race, we break that up into periods where we say this is preparation training, this is build training, and this is race specific training. And then we break that down into even smaller things. And eventually we get to the point where we say, hey, today we're going to do this kind of a workout, and this is the outcome we want from that kind of workout. That's what periodization is at a high level. If you look at periodization, normally people think it starts and it kind of grows, and there's this concept of reverse periodization. I disagree that it's reverse periodization. That is my coaching opinion, and I've earned the right to have that through spending thousands and thousands of hours of coaching and training to say I think that they're a little bit wrong with that. Because when people talk about reverse periodization, what they talk about is specifically maybe doing some of your speed work earlier in the season, and they talk about moving to longer distance later in the season. And so traditional periodization might have you doing more base work, which is like endurance focused. So you would ride your bike for 30 minutes a day, and the goal is next week you're going to ride your bike for 45 minutes, and then 60 minutes, and an hour and a half, and we just keep extending that endurance. And then as you get that endurance base, we move further into the summer, and we're going to put speed work, and that's where you start seeing people go to the track and really try and hone that. You see us try and drive different power. That's a really great idea for shorter course, or for like things like 5K and 10K training, or track work. But if you look at people that are trying to do triathlon, you're actually, like, if you're doing the Olympic distance at Tri CLE, or if you're even having aspirations to do, say, the Ironman 70.3 over in Sandusky or some of those things, those races are actually longer. Those races are more than an hour long, and your bike rides are many, many miles, and your runs are many, many miles. And so if you actually think about that, the winter time is a great time for you to be doing more of that high intensity work. And so you can actually do speed work. You can actually do strength work that builds and increases your functional threshold power or your run paces. And as you get to the summer and you see the time of day where you have more sunlight out, that's when you can actually add the endurance. And the reason I point that out is because if the goal of periodization is to move from less specific training that looks like your race to more specific training that looks like your race is actually going to look more like endurance. And so if you do what we traditionally call reverse periodization, and I'm using that word because if you Google reverse periodization, they're going to be talking about what I'm talking about. You would start with speed work and intensity work and get your speed and intensity up at short distance. And then you would, as you move through that periodization, you would extend your endurance. To me, that is what triathlon looks like, and that's what most endurance sports looks like. So I would call that normal periodization. That's not what the world calls it. So if you're interested, Google reverse periodization. The reason I say is because that would focus that winter training very differently, and I think you'd have a lot of fun with your winter training plans as you do that. Finally, I'm going to say vary intensity. One of the biggest mistakes I see people do is they just do one thing, whether it's like they get on their bike and they set their trainer on Trainer Road or on Zwift or whatever. They just set it to like 100 watts or to whatever the thing is, and they just rode, and they watched, like, a funny movie, and they just rode at that same intensity. Your body does not respond well to that. It's why when you have a coach, we talk and we put all these little interval sessions in there. Even if your goal is to ride at an endurance pace, like a zone 2 or an easier pace to change some of those endurance metrics, and you're going to do it for, like, say 2 hours, it's not the same pace. Think about when you ride outside. Do you shift your gears? Do you stop at a stop sign? Do you start again? Do you ride up and down a hill? Maybe you're doing it easier, but the reality is the workout doesn't look the same at every given moment to your body. Don't do this. Don't do the exact same thing. Don't keep the treadmill at the same pace. Don't keep the treadmill at the same elevation, or incline. Don't keep the bike at the same pace. So really would encourage you to think about using the buttons and the things you have. You should never actually be just riding at one intensity for a whole 2-hour block, or running at just one intensity for a whole 30-minute block, or whatever you're doing. Vary your intensity, not just during the session, but every session should have different focuses. So maybe if it's a run on Tuesday, you're doing speed or a threshold workout. Maybe if it's later in the week, like a Saturday or Sunday, and you're going longer, then your intensity is at a lower intensity, but you're going for a longer duration. But your intensity should vary from workout to workout, and your intensity should vary during the workout. And then finally, just throwing in a few things, because people always think they need to go to the gym and lift heavy, and it's not that there's no place for lifting. I do like lifting. I do like going to the gym. But the reality is that these are super important, and I threw them on there. You can Google them. But reverse lunge, bird dog, seated rows, crab walk, planks with abduction, which that means like getting your core engaged and lifting a foot if you don't know what plank with abduction is. These are things you can do while you're watching TV, or with a yoga mat, or in your hotel room while you're on vacation. They're so critical. Everything that we do in the sport of triathlon is based around the idea that your core is strong. So think about it. Running, what's the difference between running and walking? Because I coached some people who have gold medals in race walking, and race walking is very different. And the difference is your foot has to be in contact with the ground all the time. There's a bunch of biometrics that matter, but I'm not going to bore you with the coaching details. But the reality is the transition between run and walk is, as soon as your entire body is not in contact with the ground, you are now running. What that means is at some point you've loaded on one leg and you've launched your body into the air, but that means on the other side, another single leg is going to take the impact as you come back down, and it has to take all that loading force as you land. That landing force has to bring that back into your skeletal muscle system, and it has to then return that and spring it back forward. That means is running's really a jumping activity. You're on one leg and you jump to the other leg, jump to the other leg. The entire time your body is in the air, nothing is supporting it. So if you're only touching the ground with one leg ever while you're running, and all the time you're floating in the air, you're not touching, what's the thing holding your body up? What's the thing keeping your body straight? It's your core. I can't overstate this. And core is not one muscle. There's a million muscle groups that have to work together. Why do you get injured? Because when your core isn't strong, your hip drops. That's a pelvic tilt, or your glutes not engaged, or something else has happened because you can't take the landing force, and so your body crumples, or you can't take the launch force, or you can't keep your body straight while you're in the air. So your torso rotates, and now you have to take and compensate for that when you land. Why do we do reverse lunge? Why do we do bird dog? Why do we do seated row in the winter? So that when we get to running outside, core is strong. Core drives all the power in your swim. Core drives all the power in your cycling. Core drives all the power in your running. Without core, none of that other stuff happens. Everybody wants to make their quads and their hamstrings really big. They want to make their biceps and triceps really big. Core is the thing that drives it. Just doing this sets. You start with like 6 to 10 reps. You increase you increase like the number you're doing. So 3 reps a couple times a week, you're going to be great. So with that, I think I'm really at an appendix section where we have a lot of things. So the only other thing I'm going to do without questions, the only other thing I'm going to do is I have a lot of people ask Coach Pete, because after I talk like this, they're always like, well, what does your training setup look like and what do you do? And so I'm going to quickly show you, because I went over and snapped a couple of pictures. This is my basement. This is where I work out. This is not a gym. This is not where I bring athletes to work. This is my personal space. So this is where my bike is set up. And I want to point out a couple of things, because the first thing you're going to see is that there's a rowing machine, there is a treadmill, and there is a indoor bike set up right there. And that allows me to quickly transition. So if I'm doing a long brick set in the winter, I can start with the rowing machine and get myself warmed up. Maybe I do a quick 5 or 10 minutes on the rowing machine. Why the rowing machine? Because that warms everything up from my tiptoes, the toenails, all the way up to the tips of my hair. Rowing machines are great. So I jump on that. I do that. Now maybe I jump on the bike and I'm doing a brick workout. So I do whatever the bike workout is, and I can immediately transition over and jump on my treadmill. They're all right there. They're all highly accessible. You'll also notice that for me, I have a lot of things set up in this space because I'm actually coaching from this. We do group training rides, indoor training rides. So you'll notice that there is in this section, in this area here, there's a camera. So I can video chat with people, or I can talk to the group. We use Discord. You'll notice that I have my iPad over here that's running the training session. And I have another thing over here that has the actual workout that we're doing. And I have one of my trainer apps up. That happens to be Zwift, I think, down there. And yes, in this case, when this picture was snapped, I was watching an Ohio State football game. You'll notice that I have access to stuff. So I do have some nutrition sitting on the table over here. I have a fan over here to make sure I'm kept cool. And I have basically everything at my fingertips so I can manage without getting off of the bike. That's important. So for me, I've noticed that I have a problem inside where I will come up with every excuse to not do the workout. So that doesn't mean I'm not actually trying to do the workout, but I want to be clear, guys. I am a 9-time Ironman finisher. I have run up Pikes Peak Marathon. I've done 50-mile runs. Like I do this stuff, and I'm a coach. And you know what? I'll come downstairs and I'll be like, I'll get on the bike and start running. Oh man, I really need to get off and go to the restroom. Oh man, I should go, I should go grab like a piece of bread so I have it for later in the ride. Oh, I forgot my heart rate strap. I should go upstairs and get my heart rate strap. Whatever the thing is, my mind will come up with a million reasons to stop and go do something, because all I have to do is get off the bike. It's so easy to just get off the bike. And so I don't usually have that problem when I'm riding outside, because I'm like 12 miles away. So it's not too bad when I'm like 2 cities away from my home and I'm like, man, I wish I had this thing at home. Well, it's gone. But when I'm right in my basement, I want to get off my bike. So I make a rule. Once I get on the bike, I never get off the bike. Doesn't mean I haven't texted my wife and said, hey, can you bring this thing down? I forgot a towel or I forgot something. So I would not be as successful as I am in anything without her helping. Don't forget your support people. But you know, the reality is I've made sure I have access to the things I need. You'll also notice this is basically set up. So there's more nutrition over here than I would probably need for one ride, because that way, when I jump on the bike next time, I still have like some sodium, or I have some things sitting there, and I'm kind of ready to go. And so that kind of eliminates some of those things. But back to a comfortable athlete. Is an athlete more likely to do this? You'll notice there's a fan over here, but in this other shot, you'll notice there's a remote control for that fan. I went to the Sam's Club and I spent $42 on a fan. It wasn't $300 or $1,000. It was just $42. And that lets me turn the fan up or down or turn it on or off if I need it. And it's made a world of difference in how comfortable I am. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to actually see if there are questions or where people would like to take this conversation, because we have a couple of USAT certified race directors on the finest races that we have of access to. You have a USAT certified coach here. So what are you guys curious about? What can we help you with, and what can we talk to you about?
How many people are racing their first race this year?
This will be my first time.
Nice.
Oh,
And we
that's
have
Same here.
Sammy and Evelyn will also be racing their first time.
Oh, fun. Is Tri CLE your first race, or are you racing before Tri CLE?
Tri CLE is my first race.
Yay.
Awesome.
So far, Tri CLE, I might do other races just to get the jitters out, figure it out.
Mhm, mhm.
That is a good idea, to be honest. I'm sure Pete would agree, getting into open water and not just swimming in a pool, as always suggested.
Mhm.
Pete, what other recommendations do you have for the first timer?
yeah. So the first thing I will say is exactly what Nat just said about like open water swimming experience is super critical. So one of the main things I see athletes struggle with is they think that pool swimming is going to translate to triathlon swimming or open water swimming, and it doesn't translate real well. And so a couple things I see people make that have challenges. They've done pool training with maybe a swim coach. Again, I'm a master swim coach, so if you want to learn butterfly or breaststroke, like I'm your guy. I know how to do that. But the reality is triathlon swimming isn't like that. So we don't have lane markers on either side of us. We don't have clear water where we can see a black line underneath us. There's actually waves, and sometimes you're touching stuff, not fish. People always talk about fish. I don't know what kind of fish people have ever touched. Yeah, when I swim in the Caribbean on vacation, I can see fish, and as soon as my hand hits the water, those things are so far away from where I'm at. Like, I've never touched a fish. I have touched seaweed, I've touched sticks, I've touched other stuff, but I've never touched animals. So people have this thing, they're like, oh my goodness, there's going to be some animal I come in contact with. Animals stay away from you when you're swimming. I just want to be as clear as I can. No animal wants anything to do with you when you're swimming. But you have contact with athletes. So when you start in a triathlon, there's going to be other people that you're swimming with, and that means they might touch you. That's weird. If you're not used to it, that's an important thing to try and get used to. You're going to feel claustrophobic because you're going to be able to see a few inches in front of your face. And that is not a comment about the water quality in Lake Erie. I've swam in a million different places. You really can't see very far into the water in most places that we run triathlon. So it doesn't matter whether you're out in the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean. When you're racing, you're not going to have a lot of visibility in the water. And so what happens is that makes you feel claustrophobic. Water temperature is different. Pools usually are regulated with heat in some manner, and the water temperature in open water isn't. And that usually means at different times of the year, the water temperature is much colder than we're used to. And so you can get things that are like called the dive reflex that can cause you to go into what really feels like a panic mode. You also might be using different equipment, like if you put a wetsuit on, but in the pool inside, you're swimming without a wetsuit. All that stuff feels different, right? So what's the most important rule? We practice like we train. We practice like we race. We train like we race. And so if if you're going to race in a wetsuit, we need to practice racing in a wetsuit. If we're going to race in open water, we need to practice in open water. And that's going to go for cycling. That's going to go for running too. And I'm going to talk about those in a second. But I really want to stay focused on the open water for a minute, because open water is one of those where we think we're training and we're really not, because we're in the pool. And so things you can do inside, if you are swimming with a master swim group, or if you can have a swim club or friends, and you can get and engage with people, put more than one person in a swim lane. When I'm working with my athletes and we might have a group, I'll put like 6, 8, 10 people in one swim lane. I don't know how many people have been to the pool, but that's a lot of people. And we start on the wall and I'm like, race to the next side. And now you got people on top of each other. They're touching each other. It's not comfortable. But it's kind of fun because you make it a competition. You can get to the wall first and they're all kind of climbing on top of each other. That gets you ready, but you're in the swim pool, but that's practicing some of those skills we're talking about. I want to tell you, I've been an experienced triathlete. Like I was already a multi-time Ironman finisher, and this happened to me at Portsmouth at Triple T, but I jumped into water that was cool. Colder. I knew what the water temperature was, but for some reason my body responded to it differently than I expected. And it was a really short swim. I think it was a 250-meter swim for this specific race. And I was still in a full panic mode. And I want to be clear, when you have that, it's a really weird feeling, because my mind and everything I knew about racing and coaching, I'm like, keep swimming. But my body was telling me something was significantly wrong. And so I had to flip over on my back, and I just had to calm myself. I had to sit there with my face out of the water and kind of backstroke a little bit and catch my breath and settle down. And then I was able to get myself mentally and physically refocused and start and finish that swim. It happens to everybody. It's not I'm a first timer, I'm an experienced athlete. It can be water temperatures you think you've swam in before. There's no magic to when it may or may not happen. So number one, it's not embarrassing. If you need help, that's why we put, specifically at Tri CLE, that's why we put, I think, 480 people in the water to help. Okay, maybe not quite that many, but there's a lot of people out there. They're there to help you. Okay, that's important. There's nothing bad about getting help. It doesn't disqualify you from the race. You can hang on the life rafts. You can get assistance as long as they're not moving you forward. We want to help you. So I want to be clear. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of not being prepared. It's not a bad thing. If you feel weird, let us help you. If you're going to go open water swim, always buddy swim. Mm-hmm. Period. End of story. No conversation point. You do not go out to Lake Erie or anywhere that's unsupervised with no lifeguards and say, well, nobody else could make it, I'm going to go swim. You do not do it. Well, I brought a floaty with me. You do not do it. You buddy swim always. But if you have a friend and you can go out to the lake and practice, that's real important to get out there and try and do that. If you can't find training groups, our racing club, so TriQ has our own Tri team. If you're interested, we can hook you up with some of those training opportunities. But there's also the Cleveland Tri Club and a bunch of other people that have training opportunities in the Cleveland area. But getting out and swimming in Lake Erie or any body of water, Lake Erie just happens to be one of the easier ones, oddly, for us to get access to. Real important. So I'm going to pause because I talked a lot about that, but I don't know if there's any other questions or thought. Nat Mill, you heard me talking a lot. Did I miss a key topic on swimming there?
No, I don't think so. Like you said, it's just important to swim together and to just do it.
Yep.
And the more you do it, the less fear you have.
Yes. Yes. And also high vis if you're going to be out there. So that means like an orange swim cap if you can. They have these little things called swim buoys. You can Google them, but they float on the back. And it just makes you a little more visible to, like, if somebody's out there on a jet ski or something, they might see you. Or if you need help, it might give somebody who might be rendering aid a chance to find you. So if you're swimming, even if you're with a partner, make sure you are high vis if you can. But again, training the way we practice or training the way we race is important. And if you're going to race in open water, you need to practice swimming in open water. We give our athletes an opportunity with the coaches once every week to be in open water with a coach. That's how important it is. We don't do coached group rides with the bike every week. We don't do coached track workouts every week. We don't do coached anything else every week. But every single week through the year that you can, we get athletes into open water with a coach that can put eyes on them and work with them. That's how important open water swimming is. So let's talk a little bit about cycling. What should you practice with cycling, and what does it mean? Well, cycling is a sport that can be really dangerous. I consider cycling the most dangerous thing we do as triathletes. I want to be sure you heard me say that, because I coach people who run 100-mile races. I coach marathon swimmers. A couple of years ago, I was trying to help a person swim from literally from Cleveland to Canada. And I'm telling you, the most dangerous thing we do is ride our bike. So, and I mean that. It's why we have to have helmets on. It's why we practice things. But what does that mean? It means that there's these things called cycling handling skills, and cycling handling skills are super important. So how do you think about corners? How do you practice shifting? How do you work about stopping and being able to clip out of your pedals? And if you have clipped shoes, if you don't, that's fine. But you need to be really comfortable on your bike. And there are a bunch of local clubs, again, that can help you with that do group rides. Also, we as coaches work with our athletes, and we have a club that does that. So there is a Tri CLE club. In fact, you can see our USA Triathlon official club right there behind me, I think. So anyway, but the key here is thinking about how you take corners, how you can brake and stop the bike, how you would shift, how you can get out of the pedals or into the pedals. All those kinds of things matter. And back to everything is a training opportunity. I've had experiences where I wanted to ride in a training zone and I ended up having where I had to stop at a stop sign. Well, that's just a chance for you to think about how do you shift and down change and get clipped out and then clip back in and start, and how do you accelerate and get shifted and moved into the right zone and get set back. So everything is just a different way to reset your ideas around how am I being race prepared? How does this thing I'm doing in training help me differently? So don't be that person who doesn't understand how to ride a bicycle. And it's real simple to know how to ride a bicycle. You go to a parking lot and you practice. You practice turning. You look at a parking, a parking lot spot, and you say, hey, if I ride my bike at this speed, can I turn my bike and stay in that parking lot slot? If you miss that parking lot slot, you say, wow, that was weird. Maybe I should slow down and try again. What did I learn? Do I need to approach it in or out? So simple things like when we're approaching a turn, you always want to approach from the furthest. So if you look at the turn, the point on the turn, you want to be the furthest out from that turn, and you want to turn in towards that center point, and then you want to come back out, right? I see athletes all the time. They're coming in on a turn on the inside. You're not Tron. You can't make that light cycle turn at 90 degrees. So you want to come out and make it a nice, wide, sweeping turn. But if you're thinking about that, if you're practicing that while you're outside riding, if you're used to what it feels like to go over potholes. So how many times do you see an athlete who maybe isn't prepared for what it feels like with their bike handlebars, and they're in a race or they've had challenges, and it's just go outside and ride your bicycle. Think about it. That will get you prepared. But those are real skills. Stopping your bike. What happens if so I had an athlete and they said, I'm racing. It doesn't matter. I don't need to brake. Well, what happens if that person in front of you has a medical event or some other bike event where they're on the ground? Do you need to stop then? Do you at least need to be able to ride around them? You do. So learn how to stop your bike, learn how to turn your bike, learn how to deal with potholes, learn how to ride with people around you. A lot of opportunities to do that, but just want to be clear. There's lots of ways you can do that. Practice in clubs or working with coaches is the most important thing there. But don't just show up not understanding that, not reading the rules, not knowing how to be a part of the triathlon community. Really is a community. We're there to help. We want to help. It's not a secret club. There's no secret handshakes. Well, not many, but we really do race as a community because we only stay safe when everybody understands what's going on the course. So.
I will add a word of caution while you take a sip of your drink there. When you are going to group training rides, know the rules of the group and, ask the group leader if there's certain rules about being in your aero bars or passing each other or following, the leader in your pace line. I personally am not always comfortable riding in a pace line with people I don't know. So I avoid those particular rides. Some other people love those rides and participate in them weekly. So it's just whatever your comfort level is, but know the rules of how to ride in those groups. And there's, people are always willing to help. And like Pete said, it's a community to understand how to ride them. And they'll teach you, especially someone in the Tri Club, they'll teach you how to do it. And everyone's aware that there are a lot of first-time athletes out on the road. So it's very common. Don't feel like intimidated by joining those group rides, because I've seen a lot of people get really good at riding their bike by joining those group rides. Just know what you're getting into and stay cautious.
Yep. Yeah, that's the key. Stay cautious and talk. Communication. So yeah, that was a really good point, Natalie. As a general rule, and I can't think of a reason I would break this rule. So it's more like the law of Pete, but you should never be in your aero bars if you are behind another rider, just period. So you have your hand, if you have a triathlon bike with those aero bar things out front, you have to have your hands out where your brake surfaces are and things like that. You can get in, if you're riding in a group setting and you're at the very front pulling the rest of the pack behind you, that's when you can get down into your aero bars and take that aerodynamic savings. So they're called aero bars for a reason. When you're behind other athletes, you're actually getting the aerodynamic drafting advantage from being in the group with the other riders in front of you. So you shouldn't be down in the aero bars, but it's also super unsafe because when you're in the aero bars, you're a little less stable side to side and on your balance, and you have absolutely no ability to respond if somebody breaks or changes. And so you're going to need to keep your hands near the control surfaces on that bike. So back to what Natalie said, you just talk to the group and they will help you fit in with that group. I did list a couple of people here. I'm a member of the Akron Bike Club. They're great. They're down towards Akron, Canton area if you're further south. And the Cleveland Triathlon Club runs a ton of group rides in the Cleveland area. They're a wonderful community and they have lots of training opportunities and lots of people to give you advice. And those are both basically free. They have a small membership, like $20 or something, but they're not like coach services or something like that. So take advantage of those resources where you can.
So we are actually at 8:05, and yep. I want to be very cognizant of everybody's evening. People probably have to get ready for bed, or I got to eat some dinner. But Pete, you've gone through like so many great things. I know we didn't really touch on the running piece, but I think the most critical piece that we did talk about was going a little bit more in depth about open water swimming and safety with that and how to prepare yourself for a race. But if you have any questions, Pete, did you put your contact information on a slide? Was it
my contact information is on every slide past this, and I have a PDF of this that I'll send to you, Mel, so you can distribute it to whoever has a question. And you can always find me at triqcoaching.com or Coach Pete at TriQ Coaching. So
awesome. Thank you. And thank you for kicking off our events for 2025. And I'll briefly go over our events that we have sort of scheduled. So on our website, rockrollrun.com/events, we have our events listed. The next one is our social on March 12th. We're just trying to figure out the location, but normally it's somewhere near downtown for these socials. And typically there's pizza involved, but sometimes maybe we won't find a place. Like maybe we'll have a place that doesn't have pizza, but I don't know, pizza.
I'm working at it.
Pizza's always good. And then the other one we have listed after that is April 16th, another social. And then April 30th for a preview run at Edgewater Park. And a couple people have actually already registered for the preview run at Edgewater Park in April. Sure. So you can find those events listed. And as I have updates, I will put the updates on the website, and there'll be social posts and information in the newsletter. For any of our preview runs, we do ask that you fill out the Google form, which is a waiver. And we just have a lot of events planned each year, and it's a great way to get to know the staff, get to know other participants, and especially like with the preview runs, get an idea of the run, the layout of transition. And it's just great to create some camaraderie and community with everybody.
And it's a great place to ask questions to people who have raced before. So you don't feel, I know most of you said you're racing it, this is your first race. you're not alone. So you'll find that in, the socials and in the preview runs and clinics that you're not alone. You're not the only one that has certain questions. Encourage your friends who are racing with you to join in, whether they're seasoned or not, because they'll end up learning something that they're not aware of. And then we have resources like Pete and the Cleveland Tri Club that help us out with these clinics and socials. So you're always being introduced to someone new and different within the tri community. And that's our big thing, is that we try and make this race a community. So we're glad that all of you are part of it, and thank you for coming tonight. And we hope to see you the rest of the summer. God, I hope summer comes soon.
I hope so too.
It feels like summer after it has cold as it was a couple weeks ago. I'll take these temperatures. So
Yeah, you're right.
I
At least the sun, has been out a little bit more. That's my thing. But thank you all. Good night, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.